All right. I'm going to give everybody just a second to get started and get logged in. But I would like to welcome everybody to this incredible webinar that we have planned for you today. As you know, my name is Ginger. I'm the Executive Director of Connectionology, and we are so excited to have you back with us. I want to thank our amazing partners over at HMR, OnPoint Legal Nurse Consulting, and Fox-AE. You're going to meet them later on in the webinar, but we are so grateful for their support so we can continue doing these webinars for all of you. We have such amazing trial lawyers with us today, and I wanted to get started in introducing them. And I'm really hoping that you guys will stay in touch with them after the webinar as well. You can definitely put your questions in the Q&A box and then chat box. We'll keep an eye on those, but feel free to ask your questions throughout the webinar. And then at the very end, we'll make sure that you get a copy of the slides as well and contact information for all of our speakers. But today I want to go ahead and start out by introducing Caleb Cunningham, who's an incredible attorney over at Levin Papantonio Rafferty in Florida. And he focuses a lot of his work on mass torts. He graduated from the University of Alabama with a Bachelor of Arts in Communication and Information Sciences. And then after law school, he practiced in Mobile, Alabama, where he gained a lot of experience in criminal defense, family law, and employment matters. And then he moved to Tuscaloosa for an in-house counsel position. And that is where he furthered a lot of his experience with employment matters and corporate transactions, but he missed the courtroom. So he ended up going back and became a prosecutor attorney in Missouri. And then as a prosecutor, he was trained by the United States Secret Service in technology, and he graduated the National Computer Forensics Institute. He worked tirelessly with a lot of community organizations and charities and law enforcement during his tenure as a prosecutor, and that included teaching classes for the Missouri Office of Prosecution Services, and they actually named him the DWI Hero of the Year in 2021. He secured a lot of convictions over there with many, many cases, including trials on a double murder, a serial sexual offender, a child rapist, as well as a violent domestic abuser. So he's a passionate attorney. A lot of his efforts and dedication to his community was recognized by the Missouri House of Representatives in 2022. He is a member of all of the amazing organizations in Alabama, including the Alabama Bar Association, the Florida Bar Association, as well as the Missouri Association and the Florida Justice Association. He's also been a past representative of the Missouri Bar Young Lawyers Section Council and former board member of the South Carolina chapter of American Red Cross. Now, Tommy James, he opened his doors in personal injury law with a big focus on helping those in need. So he started his Birmingham firm and successfully represented a lot of wrongfully injured individuals throughout the entire state of Alabama, including children and elderly adults, as well as those that had mental capacities who suffered injury in the hands of another person or staff members and institutions. And he graduated from the Montgomery Academy in 1988, where he won a lot of academic awards and was a member of the state championship football team in 1987. He's acquired a lot of accolades during his practice, including being a prominent member of significant legal organizations that include the National Crime Victim Bar Association, which is dedicated to helping a lot of crime victims and their families seek justice in civil court for money damages. And he successfully litigated dozens of those personal injury cases across the state of Alabama, where he has won over $50 million in damages over the years for his clients. He's a frequent guest on a lot of statewide newscasts, as well as being a noted expert in certain fields of personal injury. And in the past, he's made a lot of appearances on Birmingham and Tuscaloosa's Law Call TV shows. And that's where they do feature a lot of prominent attorneys. And he's often interviewed on a lot of high-profile cases. So he's got dozens of years of experience, and he's got a proven record of success behind him. So Tommy knows exactly what to do when it comes to building strong personal injury cases for his clients. And he does a lot to help a lot of his clients in wrongful injury due to institutional abuse, neglect, as well as assault, including sexual assault while in an institution. And he helps them receive a favorable outcome. He's also helped a lot of individuals in motor vehicle accidents, as well as other accidents and incidents as well. And he represents clients who were injured or who've died in nursing homes, group homes, as well as daycares, mental health facilities, psychiatric wards and hospitals, including schools for troubled teens, foster homes, schools, and other facilities. So it's incredible to have him here with us today. And then last but not least, I am so excited that we also have Jeremy with us, who is a partner over at Morris Haynes, and he also practices in Birmingham. He has helped victims recover over $100 million from some of the largest corporations in the world. And he has litigated cases against Ford, General Motors, Coca-Cola, Chrysler, Takata, Samsung, Waste Management, Walmart, Michelin, Cooper Tire, Chrysler, and many, many others. And he's also fought national trucking companies like Werner, Schneider, and JB Hunt. So in addition to that, in the United States and the state of Alabama, where they have been forced to compensate for his clients, he's been there to help them. And he focuses on a lot of product defects, fires, explosions, airbag defects, tire separations, tractor trailer negligence, automobile negligence, as well as abuse, neglect, and other insurance claims. And he was sworn in to be a lawyer in 1997, but he's been dedicating his career to helping all of these victims. So it is just truly amazing what we have here today, you guys, and Caleb, Tommy, and Jeremy. I hope that you have a wonderful webinar. You learn a lot from them today, and just know that you can stay in touch with them beyond this webinar because they are incredible resources for you. I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to Caleb so we can get started, but you guys enjoy. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that marvelous introduction. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the screen share here. While I'm clicking this on, I do apologize. We're going to have a little bit of feedback with some of the videos. I do apologize about that. Even the best production team in the world, we still have a little problem from time to time. But thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited to be here with Jeremy and Tommy, two great guys and real monsters in this field. When we started here at Levin Papantonio and Rafferty in the kind of waded into the waters of the exploited teen industry, really had no idea what we were getting into, and glad to be able to partner with Tommy and Jeremy through this. So thanks, guys, for joining me today.
Hey, thank you for having us, Caleb.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. Thank you.
So the first question we get when I talk to people about the exploited teen industry is what is it? So I think that's a good place for us to start. Now let's go ahead and kick it off here. Let's see. There we go. So the exploited teen industry is everywhere. No matter where you're watching, if you're in the United States, there's one of these facilities fairly close to you, as you can kind of see from this map. They're all throughout the United States. They've been here for a long time, more than 100 years in the United States. It's estimated 120,000 to 200,000 children annually are affected by this industry. Unfortunately, we don't have exact numbers because there's different ways that the kids enter into these programs, which we'll talk about later on. And some of those are entered through private contracts. Those are difficult to track, and that's why you see such a large variation. There's more than $23 billion of public funds tied up in this industry. It has many names, very little regulation. You've probably heard of a wilderness survival camp or a reformatory school for boys, or a psychiatric facility, or they like to call themselves academies. They've got lots of different names. What is common throughout is we see sexual abuse, physical abuse, and we see no federal regulation and very little regulation on the state side. Tommy, you've been in this field for quite a while. Anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I would like to add, you mentioned that there's very little regulation, and that's true. And on the federal level, there some advocates and are trying to get together to make that happen. But even when there is good regulations, for example, the state of Alabama, where we are, there's actually good laws and good regulations when it comes to these types of facilities, but there's zero oversight. And that's a problem. So even when we have some of the worst of these places in the country, and with good regulations, but there's no oversight by our child welfare system or our government. So nationwide, it's worse when it comes to regulation. Like you said, there's little transparency, very little regulations in other states, and zero accountability for these places.
Well, unfortunately, it seems like every time you're dealing with children, particularly emotionally disturbed children, and money, these abuses crop up. Certainly in the news, we see the sex scandals with the Catholic Church and the abuses that we've seen there, or Boy Scouts of America. This is in the same vein, and we're seeing very similar abuses, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's verbal abuse in these facilities daily. There's resident on resident abuse. There's employee on resident abuse. We could go on and on. We've had cases. Jeremy and I have partnered on these as well. And we've got cases ranging from wrongful deaths to sexual assaults by employees, broken bones, bruises, just horrible things. Jeremy, you may want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, y'all are hitting it, but this industry, some of you may have heard the phrase or the term troubled teen industry. And that's the kind of the social media buzzword. And we didn't like it. We don't like it. We don't think that's the appropriate name for it. And so we refer to it as the exploited teen industry. And that's exactly what we find is that these kids are exploited. We'll get into this as we go further into this webinar, but these types of programs are a breeding ground for abuse. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, one of them is that these kids are often not believed. They come from a place of they're already in their minds, some of them in what they think they're in trouble. And so they're just not reported. The incidences of abuse are not often reported. But we say that, or I say that to say these kids are exploited, that these industries are making tons and tons of money. They're being placed there a lot of times by, state agencies, and they're just kind of forgotten. There's nobody there that's really looking out for them. They've been a lot of times either taken away from their parents, or their parents are, for whatever reason, not involved in their lives. And so there's just an exploitation that we see. So that's why I think it's important that we refer to it as that. It's not troubled teens, it's a troubled industry. And these teens are exploited. So I tip my hat to Caleb, who I think was I think maybe it was your idea to phrase it that way. And that just changes. Just sometimes what we refer to something can change how we think about it. Ain't nothing wrong with these teens. Ain't nothing troubled about these teens. We got a broken system. We got an exploitation industry.
Well, and I appreciate that, Jeremy. I know certainly here at Levin Papantonio Rafferty, we got involved with the Dozier School for Boys, which had been operating in the early 1900s and all the way to the 2000s. And, the abuses, there's over 80 children's unmarked graves there at Dozier. We don't even know the names of the boys that are buried there. And so when we got involved in that, internally, we thought, well, this can't be happening anymore. I mean, this is something you hear from a long time ago, and the abuses of the past. But when we start looking into this industry, I think it's just as bad as if it ever was. And the difference is that they're making more money than they've ever made. Right. And that's what surprised me the most when we got involved in this cases was there's just the magnitude of this and the lack of regulation, the lack of oversight, and that these children don't have a voice, as you said, because they're said that they're liars or that they're criminals or whatever. And these people use that to their advantage.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So how do children get in these facilities? So there's a few ways. I like to think of it as two primary ways. So you've got caregiver placement, educational consultants. Those are kind of what I call the voluntary. So that's mom, dad thinks little Timmy, got caught smoking weed, so he's a problem kid. We're going to put him in a boot camp and rehabilitate him or get him in line. This is where a person who loves the child thinks that they're doing the best for the child. These places, we see advertising all the time that is your kid anxious? Is your kid depressed? I mean, they have tried to criminalize the absolute behavior that a teenager does, right? And plant fear in parents and say, we can fix this. We can make them listen to you more, not be moody, these basic things that teenagers do. And these places are promising the snake oil, and they're simply not doing that, but they're having to pay tuition in these academies. That's one way the kids get into the system. Another way is the judicial system, child welfare. That's kind of the other way that kids get placed in there. Those are what we call the involuntary placements. Those are kids who have been involved in the system some way, whether it be orphans, or they're taken away from their parents, or they've committed some criminal offense. Again, well-meaning people, judges, social workers, are sold a bag of goods by these facilities that they can help. Some of them are aware, unfortunately, how dire the situation is. And what we hear in court and depositions is there's simply nowhere else to put these kids. You also school systems and individualized education plans, medical and mental health care professionals also can put, and some of these places, as we've seen in Alabama, masquerade as psychiatric treatment facilities when really they're just warehousing children. I know you guys can speak to Alabama specifically, Jeremy. Is that accurate that they like to masquerade as psychiatric facilities?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they call themselves highly skilled medical providers, but they don't have any highly skilled medical personnel at their facilities. So it's a ruse, it's a fraud, you know, they call themselves one thing, but then they just don't. You know, one of those things, they call themselves a duck, but they don't walk like a duck, quack like a duck, or look like a duck.
Well, and certainly, I mean, Tommy, we've worked on some cases, and, you know, my thought is that they use the buzzword sometimes, right? They say the therapy, they say, oh, this kind of therapy, or whatever the buzzword is, and those things just aren't happening.
No, there's no therapy, and there's the little therapy there is, they're not even made to go to that. And any abuse that they receive in these facilities is far outweighs any little treatment they may be getting. But like Jeremy said, they hold themselves out as Cadillac type facilities, and they're not. And I believe in Alabama, we're paying approximately $400 a day to warehouse each child in these facilities. And I know we're going to get to the money aspect of it earlier. But I have some of our clients, some of our parents, guardians, basically we're paying the state, we're paying our children for them to be abused.
Right.
That's what's happening. And some of these parents, we have desperate parents, desperate guardians in some of our cases who honestly believe we can't provide the help we need to for our child or for our relative. And we have no other option but to get the state involved, and they're gonna have the best interest of our child in mind. And then they place them in one of these hellholes, and we'll get into the details more later. And they have no idea what they're putting their child in. They really think they're getting help for their children, and that they're putting them in a place where these children are already traumatized often and are having problems. They're our most vulnerable. Then you're putting in these facilities again, and we'll get into the specific aspects of the abuse later, but they're being re-traumatized. And severely re-traumatized in some of our cases where there's been sexual assaults and abuse by other residents on our clients and the employees on our clients. And these boys and girls, they just don't feel safe in these facilities because they're very unsafe facilities.
Well, and certainly we see different ways that they even enter into through the judicial system, these involuntary placements. We saw, you know, I know West Coast states, Oregon, Washington, California, we're kind of exporting children to these facilities in other states. And then we're having situations where one state says, well, they're your kids. And then the other state says, no, you sent them here, so you're responsible. So ultimately, nobody's following up on the health and welfare of these kids that were placed there by the state. It's not just private placement with parents and caregivers. Is that? Yeah. And so it's truly heartbreaking, no matter which way they get there. The reason I bring it up, whether they're voluntary or involuntary, is it does affect some of the rights of action and causes of action later on that we'll discuss. Certainly somebody who was put in by a parent or a caregiver may have a consumer rights or consumer protection claim, whereas the state wouldn't have that. Or there may be a claim under something like the ADA for a state-placed child, which may not be available for a voluntary child. So just wanted to cover that early on. I will tell you two things. There's going to be a little feedback with this video, and I do apologize. It's a heartbreaking is the best way I can describe it. I've seen this video 100 times, and every time it upsets me. The young man you see in the video there was a 16-year-old named Cornelius Fredericks. He was placed in Michigan at a sequel facility for boys by the state of Michigan. He is going to throw a sandwich during lunch. And ultimately what is going to happen is 6 to 7 male staff members are going to crush him to death for that offense. So I do warn you early on that this is heartbreaking. It's difficult to watch, and unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit difficult to hear with the feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and get that started.
We're back now with our NBC News investigation into the shocking death of a 16-year-old at a youth facility run by a company we've investigated before for past violations. We want to warn you, some of the video you're about to see is disturbing. Here's Kate Snow.
You're looking at video of 16-year-old Cornelius Frederick having lunch at Lakeside Academy, a home for at-risk youth in Kalamazoo, Michigan. There's no audio, but Cornelius is seen throwing food. 2 staff members intervene, but when Cornelius throws another item, he's pushed down. 2 men become 3, then 6 on top of him. After at least 10 minutes of restraint, Cornelius is lifted up limp. And then watch what happens. Staff members, including a nurse, stand around for another 12 minutes. Then the nurse calls 911. He was in a restraint and now he's unresponsive. 2 days later, Cornelius was dead.
So unfortunately, this is not an uncommon practice. The restraint that we see at these facilities oftentimes is not in keeping with the safest and best not only the most psychiatric available means of restraint, but certainly it could result in death and serious physical injury. Cornelius made the NBC News, but we see these deaths at facilities all over the country that don't get any press coverage, that don't get any attention. This is just another day in the exploited teen industry. And I know, Tommy, you've been doing this for a long time. Speak a little bit about the restraints that you see at these facilities.
They're not restraints, and you'll see that. I'm getting ahead of myself, but in the next video of one of our cases, these employees at these facilities, the cost controls to make money, they hire minimum wage type employees. They're not trained in these restraints. They have no experience in these restraints. I mean, a lot of them worked at fast food restaurants or something like that. Nothing against that, but that's what they did. They're not qualified to be working in a facility like this. And they'll call flat out assaults restraints. They use that term restraints as an excuse for basically abusing these children. I mean, that what you just saw was not a restraint. I mean, they murdered that child. And what you're going to see in the video that we're about to show you is not a restraint either. They slam a child down. And we've had other cases where they'll slam a child down and they'll receive injuries, and then they'll report it as a restraint. And it's not a restraint. They're not properly trained in restraints, and they're assaults.
Well, and Tommy, you and I talk about this a lot. There are criteria that have to be met before we're assuming for a moment that they do need to restrain a child. There may be situations where that is necessary. That criteria requires that there be immediate threat to harm of themselves or to someone else. There's nothing about that on the video we just saw. Nothing about that. He was tossing food. Does that make him, an annoyance? Sure. It makes him an annoyance. Is it deserving of some reprimand or discussion? Sure, it does. We don't want people throwing food, but nothing about that required them to throw him to the ground and lay on top of him. Nothing. So it doesn't even meet the requirements for a restraint, if that's what they want to call it. As you said, Tommy, it wasn't. But so often, and I guess almost every time, these assaults are done without any video, without any witnesses, and they note on the records, if anything, child had to be restrained. And so then if and when the child ever does find somebody that he can tell or she can tell about what happened, then they look at the record and they say, well, the child had to be restrained for some, ridiculous behavior. And that's as far as it could possibly go. So fortunately, there's the video there. I mean, unfortunately, there's the video there. It's heartbreaking, but these workers not only aren't trained in how to do a restraint, they're not even trained onto when they are allowed to do a restraint.
Well, certainly the only requirement that seems to be at a lot of these facilities is what I call the mirror test. They hold a mirror under your nose. If it causes condensation, you're hired.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. You fog a mirror, sign them up.
Right, right.
Hmm.
And it's and these children, these people that pass the mirror test are in charge of these children, and they're called mental health professionals. They're called all these names that they're simply not. A lot of them, unfortunately, are just thugs with a uniform. So this is another video we're going to see. And Jeremy, I'll let you talk about this video before I play it. I don't think there's any sound here, so I'll just play it when you're ready.
Yeah, and Tommy, you mentioned this. This is a case that we have. We played this right after the Cornelius Frederick case for a lot of reasons, but we want you to, everyone listening and watching, we want you to understand that this is just another day at these places. It's not that uncommon. And the way what's happening here is this girl that you'll see in a moment, who's kind of walking around the room. She had been abused several times. She had been physically abused, mentally abused. She got to the point where she couldn't take it anymore. So she started trying to call people. She started trying to call the Department of Human Resources. She started trying to call some other agencies, and she had just made a 911 call to the police in this little town where this home is located. And so what she's doing as she's pacing is she's waiting on the police to get there. She wants to go and talk to them. She wants to tell them what's been going on. And so that's what she's doing right now. She goes over to this door. She's looking through to say, okay, if the police are about to come, I want to go talk to them. And then I'll be quiet and let y'all watch this. I know there's maybe another little clip we'll see in a minute, but as you can see there, as she goes and tries to open the door to go to the lobby because she sees the police have arrived, she pushes the door open and she's shoved back in. She is wrestled to the ground and thrown to the floor. And then these staff members, some of them literally are just standing around watching. And these other residents in there, you can almost feel that they sense this coming. They were almost circling her. And as soon as she goes to the ground, they just run up and start kicking her, hitting her. She's kicked in the face. She suffers a broken jaw. And some of these staff members are literally just standing around. I don't know if we have it or not, but there's one of these where that little cursor is, this highly skilled medical provider up there never moves from that location where you see her there, and she's eating potato chips the entire time. She never stops eating her potato chips. The point again is this is horrific, and it's just another day.
And you'll see it towards the end too, her eating her potato chips.
Anybody got any idea, any doubt of why she wanted to call the police? This is the staff. These are the other residents that are abusing her.
Top left corner.
But she just stand there eating potato chips.
Yeah, it's truly shocking. When I think of, as prosecutor, I can't tell you how many videos I saw of jail assaults and things, and that is the behavior that we see in an adult facility, a badly run adult facility, and this is children.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a culture of violence in these facilities. There's no doubt, and it's a top-down problem.
I'll let you, Tommy, talk about Hunter for a minute.
Yeah, this is a child who's a resident of another sequel facility in a small town in Alabama, and he had some problems. And this is one where his mom, she couldn't handle him. He needed help. She couldn't provide what she thought was enough help for him, and so she let the state get involved, and they placed him in this facility. And I've been to this facility, and when you drive up on it, it's a very scary place. The top one, he was assaulted. Well, I can just tell you, he was assaulted 4 or 5 times at the facility, twice by other residents and twice by employees. They slammed him to the ground, kicked him, punched him in the face. He got treated for these, was assaulted again, and it was so bad for this child that he attempted suicide. And thankfully after that, he was able to move to another facility to try to get better. But he literally lived in hell in this facility. He was abused over and over again by staff, by other residents. This is a facility that was investigated by ADAP. That's our federal advocacy program in Alabama for mentally disabled and mentally ill individuals. They came into this facility, did an investigation. After this happened to our client, they found blood and feces smeared on the walls. They found broken windows. They found children sleeping on concrete mattresses. Rodents were covered up in that facility. There were rats, there were snakes, there were ants, scorpions. This place was a literal hellhole for our client, and he was unsafe, and he received these injuries here. And we've got a case pending currently against Sequel in this one. Jeremy.
Well, and it's heartbreaking, but you mentioned something in the beginning that I want to make sure that the viewers are aware of. A lot of parents feel guilty that they allowed or that they even put their kids in these facilities. And so sometimes that is a barrier to getting them involved and to getting them involved in the litigation and making them realize that, hey, yes, we need to move forward. We need to hold these facilities and these people accountable. I think there's a group that feels so guilty that it's difficult for them to deal with. I also think there's a group that doesn't want to believe the child because of that guilt, because of that misplaced guilt. They don't want to believe that this happened. Obviously, on Hunter, you can't not deny when you look at his face what happened to him.
Well, and it's a problem too. Every time he was able to call home to his mom, Sequel would have a staff member in the room, and this is a common practice, so they can't report it to their social worker or they can't report it to a relative because they're scared. They're scared enough in these facilities, and they know there's going to be retribution if they report it. So,
excuse me.
Yeah, and mom actually came and ADAP, the people that did the investigation, came in and basically, saw what happened to him, but that didn't help. That didn't help. This poor child tried to kill himself even after that.
We know of instances where the child is talking to their parents, the once a week phone call they get for 5 minutes, and the staff member will have their hand on the phone and hang up the receiver if the child starts talking, negative about the facility. And then the facility will call back and say, you know how this kid is. I mean, that's why they're here. You can't trust anything they say. And there's a history a lot of times of the child, misrepresenting things to his parents or her parents, like some of y'all may have done. I never did, but some of y'all may have misled your parents on occasion. So anyway, there's that history. And often, Caleb, you alluded to this, often the family is at they just don't know where else to turn. So there's maybe a well-intentioned social worker or a DHR official that says, hey, give us custody. By giving us custody, we can place the child here at one of these facilities. They'll get all this training, they'll get education, they'll get medical care. I mean, it's like a dream come true. And so they turn over custody voluntarily a lot of times to the DHR. Then DHR starts getting federal money because now they got custody of this child. And then they send the child to one of these facilities and pay them, you know, a portion of that money that they're getting for this child. And so there's this, again, these layers of deniability and as you mentioned, Caleb, there's layers of sometimes guilt and maybe disbelief or you know, self-blame. And so they just don't want to, you know, to go forward or to seek legal counsel because they think, you know, I've made a mistake. I don't want to make this worse. And so anyway, the more people that we can get to watch these webinars, the more people that we can get to understand that this is happening, the more people are talking about this, the better the chances are that we can prevent some of this.
Well, as most any crime or nefarious act needs, it needs people to turn the other way.
Amen.
And the great thing about being here, talking to you folks today is that one, you'll be educated. Two, you should stop your friends, family, and even if yourself, if you've had a child with issues, from sending them to these facilities and do the research that's necessary. One of the reasons we partnered with the organization Unsilenced, which is a nonprofit, survivor-led nonprofit of folks who survived these facilities around the country for decades. And they have a great database that I encourage the viewers to go to. It's unsilenced.org. It's a not-for-profit. They've been a tremendous resource both to Levin Papantonio Rafferty, but also to you guys. I've really enjoyed working with Meg over there. And they have launched a project to capture these stories of abuse and to catalog some of the worst offenders around the country.
Amen.
So Tommy, I'll let you talk about Connor here.
Yeah, this is another one of our clients who he was placed in another sequel facility. I believe it was the end of 22, Jeremy, or the end of 21.
Yeah, in 21. Yeah.
Into 21, and he was having his issues. I believe he may have, Jeremy, you correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes these cases run together, but he had stolen his grandmother's car or something like that, and was adjudicated as a juvenile, and his mom thought it was best for him to put him in the facility. He was
Tommy, I'm cutting you off. That's obviously that's Tevin Park that did that, and I know these cases do run together, but Connor had missed a curfew. He had been through some little weed or something. He had a probation officer, a juvenile probation officer, and a lot of those, and I know a lot of them are great people. But this particular one thought, well, he came in too late. We had a curfew on him, and so he went and asked the judge to send him to this facility in Alabama. And I'll let you finish.
Yeah, and he was vulnerable at this facility, and he was picked on constantly by other residents, and eventually that led to him being sexually assaulted by other residents several times. A lot of these facilities, there's very little supervision of them, and when there is supervision, a lot of times they'll see problems and they fail to intervene. But here, Connor was assaulted by other residents, and he reported it. He reported it to the higher ups at Sequel. Other residents reported it to the higher ups and their other employees at Sequel, and the abuse continued against him. I mean, it was relentless physical and sexual abuse against this child. They knew about it. Sequel knew about it, and they allowed him to commit suicide. And what's interesting about this case is this drew some local press in Alabama, pretty widespread attention down here. And our offices received 4 or 5 calls from parents of other residents or relatives of other residents that were in this facility with Connor. And they said, our child, they knew. I mean, our son reported this to Sequel, and they knew about the abuse. So that's just not us lawyers, as we'll sometimes do, maybe exaggerate something. I mean, we have witnesses to this horrible abuse, and they did nothing. This child was crying out for help, and they did nothing. And he committed suicide.
Well, and one thing as a prosecutor many years ago, we had one of these facilities in our jurisdiction, and the police had to deal with runaways from the facility 200-300 times a year, would have to go out to this facility because kids were running away. And there wasn't anything to do on the criminal side of it. But if you see something, say something. The way that we can change and save folks like Connor is to say something when you see something. And for the attorneys out here that are watching this, I hope you get involved in this litigation. I hope you seek out these cases to save children, because Connor isn't with us anymore because he felt so silenced. He felt so invisible that he thought the only way to make the abuse stop was to kill himself.
I think we have a video for this one, Caleb.
We do.
Bennett is your latest client.
He was 15 years old when he was placed in sequel, and he had developed some behavioral problems, and his family, they needed to get him help. He was there for approximately 5 or 6 months. He was bullied incessantly. Like all the other residents that were there, he was treated poorly by staff. There was physical abuse by staff. Connor started being sexually abused by another resident at the facility. In April, he couldn't handle it anymore, and he hung himself in his room.
And so certainly, Tommy, you've spoken out on this on the national level, and Jeremy and I have been working tirelessly to get more attention. So if you're watching this, please, please, please pay attention, see something, say something. And if you want to get involved in these cases, certainly contact Jeremy, Tommy, me, and we'll help you get involved in these cases. So just some headlines from around the country talking about awareness. These things are all across the country. You know, certainly one that pops in my head was Ohio, where they changed the name, right? So there's so little regulation. All you have to do is shut down, change the name, and you can reopen, and same abuses continue. Again, this is just a small segment from Alabama alone about some of the abuses down there. And this has been featured on NBC News, Vice News, and local news. Again, the most important thing is to get people aware that this is happening, to see something, to say something. Now, one thing that I want to talk about now is who are some of the players. One of the worst players is Sequel Youth. So the way Sequel got their name was that one of the founders' friends had been involved heavily in the private prison industry for adults. And they thought a great follow-up, or a sequel to that, if you will, would be children, private prisons for children. And so Sequel Youth Services was born. Sequel got a lot of press for killing children. This gentleman here in the brown jacket is the CEO, Mr. Jay Ripley, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit for himself for you folks.
And the reason that we can make that profit is if you control your staffing level. So you have to have enough staffing to have an excellent program, but you can't have too much staffing to eat up your profit.
The folks dealing with them on a day-to-day basis aren't being trained properly. They're not being vetted properly. They're not being paid enough. In fact, Sequel has been known to cut staff to increase their profits. It's a for-profit business. That's what they're about. Profit, profit, profit.
And certainly in Florida, that's the case. There are several Sequel facilities here in Florida. And I believe last year they made approximately $40 million from their contract with the state of Florida. Their goal is to make money. And in 2017, they evaluated themselves as being worth approximately $500 million. They operated in, I believe, 19 states. And almost every one of those states, you will see complaints, headlines, and news from things that happen to children in those states. The facility Cornelius was at was a Sequel facility. I believe one report said that there were 8 riots by children at facilities, Sequel facilities around the country. And so what Sequel did is, as opposed to changing the way they operated or trying to become a better company, they changed the name. So Sequel became Vivint or Vivint, and Vivint became Brighter Path. And you'll see when you look at Secretary of State websites that Sequel is still billing. It still exists. It's a game. It's a shells game with incorporation. This map here is facilities in the red that have closed and the blue that are still operational. You see they prefer the southeast here, and they were headquartered out of Huntsville, Alabama. The state pays Sequel approximately $330 per child per day to house children, and sometimes that can be more if they have I've seen different contracts, like the state of Tennessee. I see one of their contracts goes up to almost 600 and something a day for a child with autism. Another thing they like to target, and we're seeing them target more and more, is children with autism because they're able to charge more for those children. Jeremy, you got anything you want to say here about
No, I mean, yeah, this may not have surprised everybody else. This shocked me. When I first started looking into these types of cases, I just somehow, maybe I'm naive, but I just thought that there would be, contracts with the state to run these things, but their profits would be regulated. There would be oversight. There would be, just not unlimited, profit motive, that it would be almost a not-for-profit system set up, because we're talking about our kids. We're talking about our state sponsored, or kids that our state are taking care of. So I just thought that it would be, hey, let's figure out a way to, have a, company to do this stuff, but the profits would be capped, or would be regulated, or would be, scrutinized or something. But you heard it from Jay Ripley say, look, we got to cut our staff, but we don't want to eat into our profit. And that shocked me. And I don't know if that shocks other people, but that shocked me.
Well, to hear the CEO of a company that evaluates itself at $500 million say that, we've got to make sure our staff doesn't eat into our profits is pretty horrendous when you're talking about children.
That's what I'm talking about. We're talking about children that need help. We're not, talking about, selling a widget to people that can afford to buy it. We're talking about our kids that don't have any other option. I just, that still to this day surprises me.
Well, I think to a broader point, the fact that there are for-profit companies doing this, generally, this is not a thing the state is doing, or a charity or something, even though some of them masquerade as charities. They are trying to make money off of this, and they're making record profits off of this. There's about 4 big providers in the country. Sequel is just one of them, but you have United Health, Acadia, and the Devereaux Foundation. They all pop into my head, and they're running these facilities. These are multi-state facilities all across the country in the United States here.
Yeah.
UHS is a Fortune 500 company.
Right. UHS is a Fortune 500 company. I mean, there's a lot of money. There's a lot of Wall Street money behind here, and they're there because they want to make money. And the way they make money is to make these hellholes. It's just truly revolting when you see the conditions that we've seen in some of these facilities. As you said, the advocacy group saw not only feces and blood on the wall, but they reported the feces and blood on the wall, came back months later, and that same feces and that same blood was still on the wall because they just don't care. They just don't care.
Right.
Caleb, I believe Ginger needs to take a break for a moment.
Okay, I'll let her, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and let her take over here for a second.
Wow. I'm still kind of like at a loss for words, you guys, but I am so glad that you're all here talking about this important subject. But my heart is breaking right now, hearing about this and watching this. And I know everybody, all of our attorneys have so much compassion as they're watching this as well, but I cannot thank you enough for sharing this with us today. I'm going to take just a brief moment to acknowledge our incredible partners that are with us and have them jump on just for a minute to speak. And I'm going to go ahead and just have all 3 of them talk now, so we'll be able to get right back into the presentation afterward. But I cannot, again, just express my gratitude for you guys talking about this. I'm going to bring in Cody with Fox-AE, and then I'm going to bring in Laura with HMR. And then you guys are going to hear from someone new today. His name is Patrick, and he's joining us from OnPoint Legal Nurse Consulting. So I'm honored to have him with us. Cody, I'm going to go ahead and have you go first. We are so grateful, as you know, to have you with us. And I'm very excited to hear what you're going to share. But tell us a little bit more about what you guys do.
Yeah, so we do litigation graphics, and so some of this stuff that you're talking about, we've done cases, and how you present your case and how it doesn't matter if it's in trial or mediation, how you present that visually sticks in jurors' minds, it sticks in opposing counsel's mind. And so we were fortunate enough to be on the Jeffrey Epstein case. And so we did some work, against him. And so it's not just, we don't animate, the sexual nature of things. We animate or illustrate like the layout of the house, or if there's lots of testimony, right? That's against him. For instance, what we did with him was we took all the testimony that was against him and we animated just piles of sheets of all this testimony that every different person was saying. It was just a big pile. And so, different things, but I want to show you real quick. We do a lot of, I'll just show you a quick animation here. Are you guys able to see this? Is that showing up?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of times where, you've got fractures, spine fractures, burst compression. In this case, the brutal police force where, they're really roughing up this guy and, they put that forearm on that neck and, we've animated, I can't show you too much because we had to clean this up, but we have where the police officer is actually pounding him on the ground. The forearm is going down. And what we've done is we've actually recreated. This is not an illustration of the fracture. This is the fracture. Neuroradiologist verified that in green. We rebuilt it. And then we show the fracture and the burst compression. And not only that, we can zoom in and really show how it's affecting the spinal cord and show how this person is now paralyzed. This one was against not only the police officers, but they also, when they brought him to the hospital, they didn't even put a brace on him. And there's video of him just flopping around with his neck without a brace. It is hard to watch. And they just let him fall on the pillow. And so now we have, somebody who's paralyzed, but timelines, anything you guys need. I'm from Missouri, Caleb. So, but we do a lot of work with a lot of attorneys and so would love to work with y'all.
Where are you out of? Missouri, you say?
Yep, Missouri. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cody. And if you could put your information in the chat box for everybody, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, thanks, guys.
And now, Laura, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you because it is an honor to work with you and HMR, and we're glad that you're here with us today as well.
Thank you, Ginger. The honor is ours. Really, you guys do such a great job of bringing all these topics to everyone. So it's really a joy to be a part of it. For those of you who may not know anything about HMR servicing, we are a national funding program. We operate in 39 states currently. We offer everything from medical funding, the cost of living, and also for the attorney directly, we offer case cost funding. So ideally, what we're able to do with the proper policy limits at play is to get involved with the very first moment of medical needs, whether that be a simple consult, whether that is maybe there's been a surgery that's already been worked up as needed, and your client doesn't have the insurance or doesn't have the copay. What we do as a company is we quickly underwrite your case, usually within 72 hours based on the information that you give us. We determine together what it is that we can help you with, and we get that approved as quickly as possible. On the back end of that, after we've helped work up the medicals and helped to prove the case and helped to prove the injury, we're also helping you out with your life care plans or your graphics that are so important to help a jury understand the injury. So there really isn't anything that we cannot do for you or for your claimant to make sure that their case is worked up properly and that a jury understands everything about your case that you need them to. Within the industry, HMR servicing is known for those catastrophic injuries. Those are the cases where your brain injuries, your multi-level fusions, those are the same cases where we recognize we're going to help that claimant out with cost of living as well, because they're going to have a longer recovery time. And we know that we're working together with you truly as a partner to take care of your claimant and make sure that your case, is worked up and that it's prepared properly, obviously. So we always say that no case is too large. And I can tell you right now, I do. Many of my cases that I'm working on are spinal cord injuries with brain rehabilitation. And we're providing 2 and sometimes 3 years of cost of living. So getting started with us is the same no matter what the case. We have a portal at our website. If you upload your case background information, we're going to treat every case with the same respect. We're going to underwrite it. We're going to come to you and get a plan and work together as a partnership to do everything that is possible. I'll put my contact information in the text. And if anyone has any questions, I'd love to send you a digital welcome packet and maybe hear about your case. Thank you so much.
That is fantastic. And thank you again so much, Laura. I can even tell you how much we enjoy working with you guys. And I hope everyone watching will save Laura's information and just give her a call if you ever have any questions. She's happy to help. But thank you for being here with us, Laura.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And now it is my honor to bring in Patrick with OnPoint Legal Nurse Consulting, who's new here with us today, but not new to the industry because he's been in here, many years now. But Patrick, it is a joy to bring you into our webinar world. And if you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about what OnPoint specializes in.
Sure. Well, everyone, my name is Patrick Stonich. I'm a registered nurse in Pennsylvania. I also have my license in about 6 other states. I've been doing legal work with OnPoint for about 7 years, and collectively, over 18 years of my career as a nurse in community health, specifically, mostly in long-term care and group homes, assisted living facilities, and skilled nursing facilities. My job over at OnPoint with my wonderful group with Dawn and Ingrid, which I'm sure other people have met, I'm one of the program directors for the long-term care division. So we will review cases for merit. We can provide chronologies. We also assist with record retrieval and record organization. The sooner we get involved with the case, the better for everyone. So we can, get to know the case together and move through the whole entire process. Besides home health and hospice and long-term care, the other programs that we have are Ingrid is in gerontology. Dawn helps with expert witness placement. So if it's an expertise that one of us cannot provide information on, we'll reach out to our pool of experts and send over a couple of options to attorneys so they can make the best decision. And then, of course, our admin people will help us follow with timelines through the whole entire process up until litigation, where it goes to. If it goes to trial, if it goes depositions, we kind of help with the whole entire process. So you can kind of consider us an extension to your team. After this discussion, I still am clinically active. So I review several cases that are group homes. My last case that I reviewed was in Illinois, and it was a group home, and the individual was beaten while the caregivers watched and videotaped it and placed it on their Facebook page. No one knew of any of this happening until someone somehow connected on Facebook and brought it to the attention of the owners of the facility, and this poor individual sat with a head injury at the group home for 4 days until they went to the hospital. So me being involved as the expert, one of the things that was helpful for the firm that I helped is going through the policies and procedures, the personnel records of, like you said, are these people really qualified? And I think we all kind of know the answer already. And talking about the state regulations, each state has some, little differences of how group homes operate and what their responsibilities are and what they're supposed to be providing and when. So that's how I helped on a couple of those group home cases. And I'll put my information in the chat. Any questions, just reach out and either contact me through email. I'll leave my cell phone number as well, so you can send a quick text or give me a call. Any questions that come up with any nursing related or medical legal, standard of care is where we can help out.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And
You're
even more, thank you for the incredible work that you're doing to help a lot of these clients and patients as well. I'm so glad that you're joining us today so you can get connected with everybody. And then also, we look forward to having you speak in some of our upcoming webinars as well, especially for a lot of the nursing home abuse cases that are happening. But it's an honor to have you with us. And thank you again. Keep up the great work.
Thank you very
If you
much.
could put your information in the chat box, I really hope that everyone will save it as well. We are so blessed here at Connectionology to work with such good people. And I just want to thank you again.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right, Caleb, Tommy, and Jeremy, back to you guys. And again, thank you for continuing this important conversation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A box or chat, and we will make sure we get to those.
Well, thank you, ma'am, and some great vendors. Appreciate them sponsoring this so we can talk to you and educate folks about something that I know that the three of us are extremely passionate about and we could talk about all day.
Right.
So what we're seeing here is just some of the headlines again. And as I alluded to, that facility in Ohio, they honestly just changed the name. And one of the stories I remember that just stuck with me, and Jeremy, you may want to talk about that, is calling the facility and asking them what the name was.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they didn't know. Yeah, we had we were trying to figure it out too. Literally, we just picked up the phone and called one of the facilities, and they answered the phone and said Montgomery facility. You know, they gave the name of this city and just said facility because they didn't know either. It had changed so many times that they weren't even sure. Yeah, it's a shell game, and it's disgraceful.
Well, and Sequel, you know, they call themselves Sequel, they call themselves Sequel TSI, they call themselves Vivint, they call themselves Brighter Path, and that's just one company. That's just one example. And all of these facilities do this game where if they get bad publicity, they just rebrand. And we see this time and time again. The ownership is not changing, but the corporation may change, and therefore, you know, it looks like they've gone out of business. When in reality, it's the same people, because there's no, to my knowledge, across the country, like registry to track these people from place to place. I know that Tommy and I met with a great state senator in Oregon who's very involved in this, Senator Gelsner, and she had met with some of these folks, and some of the folks that had one of the directors of the facility at Cornelius that killed Cornelius Fredericks just went to another facility in another state, and that happened under his watch. That death of that child was crushed, was murdered on that video, and that man just went and worked at another facility. Because there's no oversight. There's no talking between the states. And again, we see these reports, and I encourage you to go read some of these. There's a great report from 2008 from the Government Accountability Office, the GAO. So even back in 2008, the National Congress knew that this was a problem, and it documents children who died of arterial bleeding, people who died of exposure. And these are children who were entrusted in these for-profit companies, and some, like I said, masquerade as nonprofits, to be rehabilitated or to be fixed. And in fact, they died. They killed them. And we've known about these problems. They're documented time and time again. And until attorneys and people in the legal profession hold them accountable, then they're going to keep doing it, because they're doing it because they're making money.
You said it exactly. That's exactly right. We talked about this. And I think we have that GAO report as part of this slide, or maybe it's in another one. But the problem has been documented over and over again. But there's no, like I said, it's going to take, in my judgment, in my opinion, it's going to take folks like us. It's going to take the lawyers like us listening to this webinar to hold them accountable for them to make the changes, because it hasn't come through the regulation. It hasn't come through the governmental offices. The awareness hasn't come through the Alabama Department of child advocacy. Hasn't come through that. They point out the problem. They make some complaints. Nothing is done. No follow up. There's no financial incentive to follow up. And if they do shut one down, like you said, Caleb, they just move to another facility. So I think the problem, we've been exposing the problem. I think the solution comes through litigation.
Absolutely. So this is the senators launched an investigation to child abuse allegations at treatment facilities. Again, we see senators and Gelsner in particular, and Tommy, I know you've been talking to her for a long time. I think she's probably the tip of the spear as far as legislation goes.
Yeah, and you know, I know we probably need to talk about this and probably need to add it to our PowerPoint for next time. Is in addition to this investigation that's up here, that really hadn't gone anywhere. Recently, Paris Hilton and some other advocates and senators have come together to put together the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. It was just introduced a couple of weeks ago, actually, and there's bipartisan support on that. And it's a start. It's a start from the legislative side. It's going to hopefully, once it gets passed, it's going to allow more transparency. It's going to allow more sharing between the states as to what's going on in these facilities. And they're going to come up with ways to combat the abuse, try to prevent the abuse. And that's a start. But like Jeremy said, litigation is where it's going to make the change. I mean, hitting them where it matters most, like Jay Ripley in the pocketbook. That's going to create the change, and it's going on all across the country. But we like to see the awareness, and with Paris Hilton doing that, and Senator Tuberville from our state, some other Democrat senators from across the country getting involved in that. It's great to bring awareness, but it's going to be the litigation that's going to bring the change.
Well, and for the viewers who may not know, Paris Hilton famously was sent to several of these facilities in her youth. And at
private pay ones.
Right, private pay. Some of them were charging up to $12,000 a month for her to be there. And she was being sexually assaulted repeatedly by male staff members at night under the guise of pelvic exams and things like that, when in fact they were molesting her repeatedly at facilities that cost great amount of money. I know one of these programs we did, we had a question from a viewer who asked, is this racially based? Do we see a disproportionate group affected? And I think it's more economically based. Certainly in Alabama, the kids who are being put in these facilities are generally low income children, low income families from the state commit, but the parents who have money are also being bamboozled. It's just a different type of facility. It has a different name and different packaging. So it's getting all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life. And like I said, Paris Hilton has been very vocal on this, and she's helped lead legislation in, I believe, 7 states now. So for those of you at home, we're wondering why we're talking about Paris Hilton. That's why this is something she's very passionate about, and she's shown that she can get things done legislatively. So some challenges and considerations we see, and I know we've already kind of alluded to this, is the kids aren't forthcoming. They, anytime, again, as a former prosecutor, you're talking about sexual assault, even in adults, that have gone their whole life without even a speeding ticket. That is a difficult thing to talk about, much less as a child who has been placed here by your parent or a loved one. Some of these children feel betrayed, or they feel that they can't tell their parents, or some of the parents don't feel that they can believe them. So you've got a lot of shame, and they don't want to talk about it. We talked to a client on the West Coast not long ago, and he said, I didn't want my parents to feel bad. And so he didn't tell them. He didn't want us to have a fight with them. So he just didn't reveal this for a long time. And it's truly heartbreaking. I think by raising the awareness, we can make kids comfortable talking about this, reporting these abuses. Certainly, also, we talked earlier in the program about while they're in the program, they're being monitored so closely, and their communication with the outside world is monitored so closely, they're not allowed without being punished. The wardens are controlling them and what kind of messaging they're allowed to send out, and they're going to be punished. Certainly, you can have issues with parents or guardians. There can be questions about custody. They can have problems in their own lives, and somehow that's how these kids end up in these facilities. If mom and dad have a substance abuse issue or something, that may be how the child came to be in these facilities, and that can be a challenge from a legal standpoint. We do next friend sometimes in Alabama, depending on the state law and whatever state you're in. We've represented folks in, I believe, in all 50 states, but those different laws, and that's going to be different from state to state. Facilities blame the children. That's the old go between for them, is that these kids are troubled. You can't believe them. They're troubled. They lie, they cheat, they steal. That's why they're here. And the facility says that as an excuse. It's like, well, you can't believe it. And what we saw with Cornelius, they put those cameras in because of complaints and because of lawsuits. And they said, oh, we'll show you what a good job we're doing. We'll show you that these kids are lying. And really what happened was we saw them crush a child to death. That's what we saw. That's what the camera showed. And time again, unfortunately, though, from my perspective, these facilities don't have cameras. And that can be an issue when you're presenting to a jury or getting the ball rolling.
Well, also the staff knows where the cameras are.
Right.
So Tommy and I just handled one not too long ago where they lift the kid up. They go right around the corner. I mean, he's on the floor. They pick him up by his shirt, collar. Walk right around the corner and slam him against the wall around the corner. Of course, it's not on the video because they know where the cameras are. But then, of course, like you said, the documentation, they're the ones that get to write the documentation.
Right.
We face these in a lot of cases, though. I mean, this is nothing new for trial lawyers. I mean, we need the information from the defendants we're suing, and so they're going to draft the documentation to cover them and to protect themselves. That's a problem that's not any unique to this industry, but it is certainly strong in this industry because there's just no other voice besides the child, and they just don't put that in their documents at all.
Well, and it certainly, if the regulators were doing their job and oversight, we'd have more documentation. But the regulators are either not requiring or not following the laws that are in place. So you're not getting use of force reports. You're not getting these things that exist because you have a child with a black eye, you have a child with a broken arm, or you have a dead child. And so the facts speak for themselves. And it's interesting to see in some of these cases just the absolute dearth of documentation. One of the things that interested me early on in these litigations when we started working together on these cases was the fact that some of these cases are medical malpractice cases. There was a case out of New Jersey where they sued the psychiatrist. He was doping up all the kids on Haldol, I believe, and won quite a lot of money. But medical malpractice cases obviously restrict discovery, and we see some of these companies run in and say, "Oh, we're medical professionals. You can't have a corporate discovery. You can't have the notes of incidents with other kids. You can't have this or that, depending on different states," and that can be a challenge. And that's one of the things that this litigation requires, is knowing how to kind of maneuver that as you get started. Child welfare agencies or other confidential objections. Obviously, when you're dealing with children, there are laws in place to protect their privacy as well. There should be, but negligent regulators use that same thing to justify and hide their behavior. Unfortunately, that's some of the things we've seen. I think, Tommy, you can speak to that a little more.
Oh, yeah. In addition to the child welfare agencies, these facilities, they won't produce the records when they claim it's a medical malpractice case. And we're in litigation right now, and there are some appeals going on whether a case is not medical, whether a case is med mal or not. We're involved in that, but these facilities will withhold the records they're public records. There's some mentioned use of force records earlier. There's also what's called critical incident reports across the country. Every time if there's an assault, an alleged assault, or unknown injuries occur to one of these residents at these facilities or in one of these programs, these reports, it's federal law, they have to be filled out and produced, reported to the state welfare agency and to the federal government. Well, we know these documents have been done because we have sometimes gotten them from other sources, but these defendants and the child welfare agencies will do everything they can to prevent us from getting them. So we have had difficulties in those areas too. And this whole industry, I mean, it operates in darkness, and we're trying to shine a light on it. And that's what this litigation does, because these are difficult cases, but somebody's got to step up to the plate. And I hope lawyers on this call will do that. They're difficult, but they need to move forward.
Absolutely. And, one of the other excuses they give us time and time again in these cases is that it was the third party criminal act. It's John, he's the criminal, we can't be responsible. But what we're finding, though, is not only did you hire John, but you knew John was a criminal, or you didn't do an investigation into John, or John has molested a whole bunch of kids and they've all complained and you didn't do anything to him. Jeremy, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, or they'll say these, the kids that assault these other kids, they're the ones that were to blame. They're the criminal, even though they're children. We're a house where they'll say, look, we hold problematic kids. And as much as we try, these kids are problems. And so when they fight and they get into disagreements, there's not but so much we can do. I mean, as a prosecutor, you saw that in jail cases and stuff, I'm sure. So it's just, look, it's everybody's fault but ours.
Right. Well, and that's what they go to time and time again. It's everybody's fault but ours. And we see that with criminals, and I think certainly this industry is filled with them. So the opportunities here, as we talked about, these kids need us. They need us worse than perhaps any client that we have. They need us. I became a lawyer because I wanted to do good. And this is our chance to do good, to help these children. I think about that child, and there's several of these children who feel so lonely, who feel so invisible that nothing is going to get better and that they take their own life. We can help change that. We can hold these corporations accountable. We can hold these regulators accountable. And by bringing this legislation and by talking to folks like you, we're able to raise awareness and save the next child. One of the opportunities here from a lawyer's perspective is the defendants aren't organized yet. They probably will be in the future, but this is early in this litigation, this onslaught of litigation. What we're seeing is that one law firm, defense firm, is disclosing something that the other one is not, because they're not using the same group. They're unorganized. They don't have a litigation plan, and you're able to get things that really expose a lot early in this litigation, which is another reason why now is the time to sue them. And now is the time, not 2 years from now or a year from now, as our litigation becomes more mature. These facilities are extremely well funded, insured, and backed. We see Wall Street money. We see hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. One of the Fortune 500 companies, as Jeremy pointed out, is one of the biggest players in this industry. Like I said, they brand themselves and they package themselves. And certainly you'll see the mom and pop kind of place out there. But a lot of these are gigantic corporations that are running a for-profit, and they're carrying insurance. They're ripe for the plucking. These aren't one-offs. We certainly see changing attitudes regarding teen mental health over the years. Certainly within the last 20 years, we've understood more about the human brain, particularly the teenage brain, as much as it could be understood about teenagers. And we understand that these facilities and what they've done is not working. It is not fixing these children. It is not making them better. And in fact, it's re-victimizing a lot of them. We've seen some class actions. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of class actions be unsuccessful, but we think in the future there's going to be some that are going to be successful as different causes of action have evolved. Most importantly, for some of folks on the call, this is a legacy case. This is legacy work. This is something that you should be proud to tell your grandchildren that you were part of, that you helped stop this industry and you helped save that child that has suffered this abuse. Jeremy, I'll let you talk a little bit here.
No, thank you. I think you said it very well. These are the kinds of cases that once you start working on them, you just you just know you have to keep working on them. I guess is you can't. I mean, you just have to help these kids once you start, and you are so proud if you can make some change, and I think we will. I know we will, and every lawyer that does plaintiff's work wants to make a difference in the world, and representing people in car wrecks is wonderful. That's fine. I do it I've done a lot of them. I'm gonna continue to do a lot of them. We're not really changing the world too much. When we're changing those folks' lives maybe, and that's great. We can change this entire industry, the entire way that our children are treated and taken care of when they need us like this. We can make a tremendous difference in the lives of a whole generation or multiple generations of children. And it's just something that I'm just so proud and thankful and grateful to be a part of, and grateful to Tommy and grateful to you, Caleb, and all of the lawyers around the country that reached out to us since we've started working on this. And I'm just so proud to tell people ask me what I do for a living. I am proud to tell them what I do for them.
Well, Tommy, I know you've dedicated most of your career to these cases.
Yeah, and it's been frustrating. I've been handling these types of cases for probably over 20 years. And it's encouraging to see your firm, a national firm, get involved in this, and Jeremy's firm, a larger firm, get involved in this kind of work. And now we're spreading the word across the country. It really is encouraging that, and like Jeremy said, this can be real change, true change. I'm proud of all the work I've done as a plaintiff's lawyer. Like Jeremy said, making lives and individual and families' lives, but this can be a game changer for these children. And we're on the ground floor of it, and we need as many people across the country to help us do it. And we're going to make that change.
So I want to talk a little bit about the criteria. I think, certainly you can hear it in Tommy's voice and Jeremy's voice, and I think you can hear it in my voice. We're very passionate about these cases, but when you're evaluating them, what is the criteria? What are we looking at? So first of all, you've got to be held at an exploited teen facility. These are, academies, troubled teen homes. They have a lot of names. Essentially, if you've got a facility that's holding children, it's probably in this industry in some way, whether it be a wilderness therapy camp. That's what we need. We need somebody who's physically held at one of these facilities. We generally require serious physical injury, sexual assault, or wrongful death, and that can be a suicide or murder in the case of Cornelius. We had a case here in Florida where the child, the facility, she kept complaining about her stomach hurting, and in a very short period of time, they administered 20 doses of Pepto-Bismol. She was unable to eat anymore, so they would force feed her soup. She was found unconscious on her floor and would die on the way through the ambulance to the hospital. These are serious physical injury, as you saw in some of the children here, the concussions, the broken bones. We see those quite a bit. And the statute of limitations varies depending on whether or not your state has minority tolling or the state that we're looking at has minority tolling. Some states do, some states don't. Sometimes it's interesting to see the states you would think would have minority tolling, they don't. And some of the states you would just know that they don't, they do. And there are special exemptions across the country for sexual abuse cases. Maryland most recently passed one that essentially forever, if you're sexually abused as a child, you can bring these cases. Some states have very long periods of time for sexual abuse cases specifically. And that's, again, a state by state specific criteria. Jurisdiction can also be a little interesting sometimes, depending on if the child was forcibly sent to a facility. I think in the cases that we've been involved with, they've all been the state that the facility was in, even though you may have a kid from out of state, but certainly be looking at your jurisdictions, be looking at what's the best venue for you, whether it be state or federal. There's a lot to look at there. Tommy or Jeremy, do you want to say anything about criteria?
I think you covered it. I think, yeah, I mean, at least for us, specifically, it does need to be, a really significant injury. It's just, there's not enough hours in the day. Every kid that goes to these homes, honestly, has suffered. I mean, that's the truth, they have. But to I guess, rise to the criteria for filing a case, it needs to be a serious injury or a sexual assault. And I think I do want to say this. I want this to be somewhat, I'd like for us to share information. This is such a good opportunity because the defendants aren't organized like a lot of these big companies are, Ford, for example. I mean, they have national discovery litigators, and they have, national counsel. Right now, we don't have that in this industry. And so we could actually have the advantage if we would agree to communicate with each other and share information with one another and, work on cases together, fine. But if not, at least share the information of, hey, here's what we're finding. Here's some documents we received. I believe we could actually have that advantage that so often the defendants have, because we were organized before they are.
And there are some unique cases that a lot of these facilities will use seclusion for punishment, try to change these children's behavior. And there'll be some extreme cases of exclusion of seclusion. Well, they will not allow these children to use the restroom, will not allow them to eat. We'll look at cases like that if they're long gone. We've had children who have had to defecate in their rooms that don't have plumbing. We'll look at those. We probably ought to mention some of the big players. We've mentioned Sequel, Vivant, whatever they're calling themselves today, UHS, Acadia, and Devereaux. I believe, Caleb, you touched on those, but there are a lot of other smaller operations operating these facilities. Like Jeremy said early on, there are multiple of these facilities in people's community. And what I think needs to happen is that attorneys need to market for these cases. We've had success marketing for them on Facebook and other social media outlets. We're happy to help with that. We'll provide any help we can on social media ideas to help you promote these cases in your area. We've gotten good media attention on the cases we've received here. That's another way to get these cases. They're out there, and plaintiffs, lawyers who want to make a difference need to be looking for these cases. Like Jeremy said, we're happy to help, but regardless, these cases need to be brought.
Absolutely. Well, and it amazes me how many folks don't realize that there is somebody that can be held accountable, that they don't realize that even though the juvenile system puts you there, they're not allowed to beat you. They're not allowed to sexually assault you. And so I encourage everybody out there that's interested in these cases to advertise, to educate your communities, to educate the public, because several people, certainly when you're in a car crash, you've got a case because your back hurts and you were in a car crash that wasn't your fault. These are a little different. These are a little more nuanced.
And we're happy to come talk to groups of lawyers. If you have organizations in your community, we would be more than happy to come make this presentation or another presentation to attorneys, just so others can be aware of this litigation. We're happy to help in any way, answer any questions that you may have.
Absolutely. I know, Jeremy and Tommy, we've talked all across the country now about this, and every time it just amazes me. So excited to be working with you guys. I know our firm is fully dedicated to it, and you guys are as well. If you've got an advocacy group, an organization that you want for us to come speak to, we'd be happy to. This is something we're really passionate about, and education is a big component on these, is letting people be aware. Certainly I thought this was something that may have happened 100 years ago, but sadly it's happening in your neighborhood right now as we're talking.
Does anybody have any questions? We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely. And I wanted to just tell you guys, while everybody is, and I think of some questions they might want to ask. I think that was an excellent idea for everybody watching, is go to your state trial lawyers association, go to AAJ, NTL, and a lot of these other great groups, and get Caleb, Tommy, and Jeremy and others, invite them to your annual conventions, to your special events, to have them come and speak about this important topic. And hopefully with all of your permission, I'll be able to post this webinar on our YouTube channel, that everybody watching can go ahead and share that with another, attorney or law firm, someone that because I think you said it correctly, getting the awareness out there about this. And then you covered so many important things in this webinar that I think it's such a great start for somebody who hasn't even taken on a case like this yet. But all three of you are amazing resources. And I would love to do anything that we can here at Connectionology to continue getting the word out about this as well. But I am just amazed at the work that you guys are doing. This is such an important topic that I think needs to continue being talked about. And I just cannot thank you enough for your time and your dedication to helping all of these clients who really need the help. This was a very emotional, very powerful webinar today, and I'm just still a little speechless, you guys, but I just want to thank you again for all that you're doing. If anyone has any questions, please let us know. I'm going to take one more quick break because no Connectionology webinar is complete unless we bring in Ted with HMR, because he always pops in to do our wonderful coffee giveaway. And again, after this webinar, I'm going to make sure that all of you get a copy of the slides from today so you can refer back to them. Feel free to share those as well. And then also stay in contact with Caleb, Tommy, and Jeremy, and save their information in case you'd like to talk to them later on down the road. Because as I said, you never know where the next case is going to come from. It could be a neighbor, somebody at church. You just never know where you're going to hear about somebody who needs help. And I think this is a great start to kind of get the word out. Now, I did have a quick question for you guys. Are there any litigation groups or listservs that are already established where if someone watching wants to get more knowledge on this, where they can go to? Or is that something
There's nothing
still
right
being
now,
built?
but there's nothing right now, but certainly reach out to me, Jeremy, Tommy. We're happy. We're very passionate about this work, and we'll be happy to talk one-on-one with anybody that's curious to get involved, that wants to tackle these guys. They're bad guys. These kids need our help. And, my phone number and emails available on the slide deck, please. And I know Jeremy and Tommy feel the same way. Give us a call. We want to help.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. And I saw Ted is here. He has popped in. Ted, thank you for joining us today. We're glad that you're back with us because we missed you. But if you don't mind, tell us who the wonderful winner is today.
Excited to announce it's Andrea Nielsen out of Woodland Hills, California is our winner of some great coffee today. So congratulations.
Fantastic. Congratulations, Andrea. Thank you so much for watching this really great webinar that we had planned today. Ted, thank you so much for being here day in, day out to do these amazing coffee giveaways. Andrea, both myself and Ted will be in touch with you after this webinar, but we hope that you enjoy it. And also, don't forget, if you guys did not win, there's going to be more webinars. And I have a whole entire June schedule popping up in the next few days. So you'll be able to watch those webinars and also share them with your colleagues. Ted, thank you for being with us. We appreciate everything that you do.
You're welcome.
All right, let's see. I didn't see any last minute questions yet, but again, thank you so much to everybody watching. We really appreciate your time. And then Tommy, Jeremy, and Caleb, you guys are incredible. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Do you guys have any last minute words before we head out?
No, just thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention. These are really passionate cases. I know my firm is dedicated to them, and Tommy and Jeremy, they've been great to work with. This is a team effort. This is a team effort for these children. It's worth doing. We can make money doing it, but more importantly, we're doing the right thing. And I think that's why many of us went to law school. This is a passion project. This is a legacy case. Please help us in the fight.
Well said.
Thank you, guys. All right. Have a wonderful afternoon. We'll be back again with you very soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.